If you want your retirement to be a cookie cutter, well, go get you some cookie cutter things at the store and just make yourself a batch of retirement cookies. Otherwise, you want to get yourself an actual plan and an actual strategy that helps you in retirement. So let's talk about how no two retirements are the same. Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with Phil and I. Hopefully you liked my cheesy little cookie analogy that we used to start the show. But look, Phil, no two retirements are the same, right?
Nope.
If you're looking for stuff that actually benefits you and helps you with the nuances that is you in your life, a cookie cutter plan is not going to make that possible. Yeah, it's going to do some of it, I suppose, but
it'll get you in the right direction.
It'll get you, I guess, in the vicinity.
Point you in the right direction. It gives you maybe some areas to consider. But at the end of the day, it's like the 4% rule, right? We talked about that.
Yeah, okay.
It's a great concept. Maybe point you in the right direction of, do I have enough? But at the end of the day, that should not be your plan.
Exactly, right? Because it'll get you to the town, but it won't get you to the actual street address and the house you were heading for.
That's exactly. Good analogy. So
yeah. All right. So let's just start with a couple examples for people to kind of understand what we're talking about, right? So share a story or an analogy, whatever you want to do with some of these, Phil. But let's talk about the age gap, right? So I'm 5 years older than my spouse. That will change planning.
Absolutely. Yeah. So age gaps change a lot of things in the plan. And number one is looking at life expectancy, right? So especially if the male is the older spouse, statistically men are going to be outlived by their wives 5 to 10 years anyways, even if they're the same age. So now if the male is the older of the spouses, that time of being a surviving spouse, which there are a lot of things play into that. Tax rates go up because you're now single versus married filing joint. You lose certain income, you lose one of the Social Security, the lowest benefit. If there's a pension, maybe you lose some of that. So it just makes it more important to really look at what does this look like for the surviving spouse standpoint. Social Security, it plays heavily into that decision, because if there is that age gap, it starts to make the Social Security analysis more complex because of spousal benefits. So the spousal benefit isn't available till the other spouse files. So the older spouse, if they're waiting until 70, let's say, to grow that benefit, well, then that means the younger spouse can't get spousal. So, there's a lot of nuances that play into that.
Yeah, for sure. And
healthcare, you can go on and on. For,
long-term care, for sure. If a long-term care event hits the older one. And then but then there's just the simplest one of, and we just did the podcast last week and we were joking about my situation a bit. But there's the simplest one of, oh, wait a minute, you're going to be retired 5 years before me, and I got to work and watch you sit on your keister.
Right. So, that's part of it too, is, so
that's part of it.
When are you going to retire as a couple? Is it when the oldest retires, or is the oldest going to retire and the youngest is going to continue to work?
Right.
And maybe that's fine. Maybe, in your lifestyle, you've already kind of figured that out, but
if you
that brings up health insurance, right? Okay. Yeah. So if the oldest retires, and especially if they're not of Medicare age yet, well, then the younger, if they're still working, do they have coverage for the older spouse through work? Or if they're both retiring at the age that the older spouse retires, but the younger isn't eligible for Medicare, now you get this gap. There's all sorts of factors that play.
Oh, yeah. And if you really want to add a kink in the armor, chink in the armor there, the problem is, what if you do early retirement, right? So then add that to the equation. Now, it doesn't have to be with an age gap. You guys can be the same age, but still going into early retirement is a whole set of, a different animal itself. And typically it's the medical, right? Because what do you do if you retire at 60, for example?
Right. Yeah. So 60, if you retire at 60, you've got 5 years before you're Medicare eligible. Which now you're on the marketplace or COBRA for a short period of time, 18 months to bridge that gap. But that can
and you better run the math, Phil, right? Because what's 5 years worth of medical insurance going to do to your retirement money, right? If you're paying that.
Yeah. So looking at a married couple in that age range, just for some, not great coverage, you're looking at probably $1,400 to $1,500 a month for marketplace coverage. Yeah. So it can be a substantial out-of-pocket expense. that, yeah, granted, based on income, maybe your income can be lower, so you might get some subsidies. There's all sorts of factors that play into that. But yeah, medical is probably one of the biggest factors in that. But to me, considering early retirement, hopefully you've looked at this earlier, right? So it's not you're age 59 and saying, yeah, I think I'm done at 60. How does this work? Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
probably not going to work.
Yeah.
Now,
Let's please, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start
If
to
you
do
watched
some
our show at all, if you watched more than one episode, just please do one thing for us. Do not decide to retire at 60 at 59 and a half.
That's right. Yeah, I'm done. I'm just,
Yeah.
it was a bad day at work today. I'm done.
Right. Because you're going to have to plan for that. Otherwise you may really not have be happy.
You might not have the retirement you anticipate. So yeah,
exactly.
not to say it wouldn't work. I mean, we can make it work.
No, but a little runway to plan would be helpful.
Yeah.
Right? So a little
Yeah.
bit.
So if you've planned on, hopefully, and the key is planned, right? You planned on early retirement. You've looked at this in your 50s or even before to set yourself up that was my goal.
Yeah.
Knowing that, yeah, I'm going to have this higher level of expense for 5 years bridging Medicare. I've got this longer runway now that I'm going to have to pull from the accounts from. So, I mean, there's all these different factors that play into it.
The Tax Smart Retiree is your comprehensive guide to mastering tax efficiency for a flourishing retirement. You will find indispensable advice and actionable strategies designed to enhance tax savings, maximize Social Security benefits, protect against market volatility, and develop a customized retirement plan. To get your free ebook, click the link in the show notes of today's episode and download your copy of the Tax Smart Retiree right now.
Phil, divorce. Okay, so again, the topic of the conversation this week is, cookie cutter's not going to get it done. So there's a lot of nuance. Like, go watch our last episode about separate finances, for example, and then add divorce to that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, divorce is truly now separate finances, legally separate finances. So,
and if you've been doing separate finances, breaking that up is going to be fun.
Right. A divorce, especially later in life, when maybe you weren't planning for that, wasn't on the radar, so to speak, but now you're right at the brink of retirement and you end up in a divorce scenario.
Yeah.
Potentially changes everything, right? Because the reality is a married couple together can live more cost effectively than two singles, right? Just housing alone, right? Because you've got one house versus two.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, there's all sorts of factors that play into that where, your finances together might have been enough for you to retire together, but maybe now in a divorce scenario, it's not, or at least it's not the same vision of retirement you had before. If you're in the process of a divorce, and you've already planned out retirement, it definitely is something you have to now reconsider and look at the net effect of that, and see, does the plan still work, and work with an advisor, especially during that divorce process as you're going through the settlement of the assets, because there's a lot of little nuances, taxes being one of them that
Sure.
you have to truly understand. Because if one spouse says, well, I'll keep the house and you keep the retirement accounts. Okay, well, the house is going to be a tax-free asset for the most part. Retirement accounts are not, right? So even if they're the same value, at the end of the day, the spouse that got the retirement accounts is going to have less net assets. I mean, there's a lot of nuances that have to be played in.
And you may need to sell the house, with the current economy and the housing market still being high, because you may get more for it, and then you're splitting that. So then you might as well just split that, and then you split the retirement accounts, and then it's a little bit more even Steven. So
right, yep,
yeah, and if that's the case, and you are older going through a divorce, I will say that it feels like I've seen more of the gray divorces be a lot more amicable than when you're younger.
Yeah,
when you're younger, because you're typically just more hot-headed, I guess, when you're younger. So
yep. Yeah,
but either way, you need help, to your point.
Again, yeah, it does definitely change the overall retirement plan that you have to see. How does this work?
Yes, well, yeah. Do you still work with both parties, or do you kind of suggest that one person probably gets another person, or just both people should maybe go find someone else?
That's where I have to be careful. I mean, they both have to agree if they want me to work with them together.
Gotcha.
Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I've got to take my client's quote unquote best interest in mind.
Right.
Well, most of the time, what is right for one spouse is not going to be beneficial to the other spouse.
Gotcha.
So
is it better for them to get the process done, and then you help them as individuals afterwards? kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, if it's truly amicable and they're just wanting to make this happen as easy as possible, and they're willing to work together, and we can get that in writing that they understand and are comfortable with me helping on both sides.
Right.
We can probably do that, but
Gotcha.
Again, it'd be a case by case scenario. So
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, it makes sense. And it's like, anything, it's like, well, you've been awesome, but I think we better find two different people or whatever the case is, just to kind of make a less stressful situation.
Right.
Special needs planning, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know how much cookie cutter takes into account that. I'm not sure. So
yeah,
this is where nuance comes in.
Yeah, we did a whole podcast on this.
We did,
quite a few episodes ago. But yeah, I mean, if you do have a special needs child, it is a different set of retirement facts for sure. Just from, first of all, day-to-day expenses, right? Does that special needs child, do they have their own finances? Do they have Medicare? Do they have some kind of governmental benefit? So they do have some income sources coming in, and if they do, is that enough to provide what they need, or are you still having to budget, so to speak, for out-of-pocket expenses to help provide for them? And the biggest piece in special needs planning is, well, what happens when you both have passed? That child still probably is going to be alive, so you're going to have to make arrangements for them for the rest of their life through estate planning and setting up special needs trusts. And the tax side of that whole side of planning is vital. I mean, you can lose a bunch of it to taxes if it's not set up the right way. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so there's a lot of little nuances, especially in the special needs scenario.
And then the final one, let's talk about relocation, right? Mm-hmm. So, a client retiring any place else in the States, maybe, but boy, even internationally, that could be interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where you want to retire, right? So most of the clients that we work with end up retiring, in Michigan, or whatever the state is. Some of them,
Florida,
or Florida, right? Or they become snowbirds and, they're in Florida 6 months and, back and forth. Yep. But again, those are all discussions we have during that during that planning process. I've got another client though, that her scenario is she's retired and planned on staying in Michigan, but now her kids are living out on the East Coast or the West Coast. I mean, so in Seattle area. So she's considered, well, what does it look like if I move to Seattle? Much different economy in Seattle than it is Detroit. Her housing alone is more than double what it is here.
Yeah.
So we've gone through that planning process and discussion with her, and in her scenario, it just doesn't make sense. So what she's settled on is it's cheaper for her to keep the house here and then fly to Seattle, a couple of times a month, once a month, whatever it happens to be, and just stay with the kids. They have the extra space.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of where they settle at this point. But yeah, so if your ultimate goal is to retire in another location, make sure you've had that discussion with your advisor so you can start to look at cost of living in that location so they can build that into the plan.
Oh yeah. Do some research, man, for sure. Don't just do, we did a podcast on this one too, actually, I think, Phil, the allure of the no income tax states, right?
Yep.
So everybody in Florida being the prime example, right? Or Tennessee, or whatever, right? So, there's a lot of pros, but there's some cons too. So double check that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you have to understand all the ins and outs of a state that you're going to live in, both from just general housing costs, but how do they get their taxes? Is it through income tax? Is it property tax? Is it sales tax? Some combination thereof. And very often they might be low on one, but high on the other. At the end of the day, the state's going to get their tax from somewhere, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you just understand where they're getting it from and how that plays into that decision. So,
well, the cookie cutter stuff, again, I think we've all probably kind of agree on that. We, no matter what it is in life, a lot of times the cookie cutter option is usually not the best one unless it's literally cookie cutter, cutting cookies. So do yourself a favor, get yourself onto the calendar, have a conversation with a qualified professional in your area. Or you can also just talk with Phil. He helps people all across the country as well. So, but the point at the end of the day is to get someone who can look at your unique situation, walk through that with you, and kind of just help you find the right path for yourself in your retirement journey and prepping for retirement as well. And if you need help, there's links in the show descriptions below. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube and all that good stuff. And we will see you next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. Thanks, buddy.
Phil? Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management.
The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.